Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Elizabeth Fideler from the Sloan Center on Aging and Work at Boston College. Liz, a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
So you're doing work about how people in their 60s and 70s are heading back to work. Can you tell us a little bit about your research and why they're doing that?
Well, the obvious explanation, what would occur to most people is, oh, they must need the money. But I have found that there are other reasons, and the financial ones certainly are there. Maintaining health benefits, certainly important, but at least in the U.S., with our current economic climate, even after the recession, we're still dealing with very uncertain economic conditions. People just lack confidence about whether they have enough to retire comfortably, especially the boomers who are coming up into the Social Security age. And so people who did retire are going back to work, and working for pay in retirement is becoming normal. And I was curious to find that women 65 and older are the fastest growing segment of the labor force. That was totally intriguing to me, and I began to survey women, older women who were working. In fact, the women I surveyed were ages 60 to 84.
No kidding.
So we really need to push this up into the 80s. It's not just 60s and 70s.
What about age discrimination? I thought people always say, well, now I can't get a job because I'm too old. It sounds to me your evidence is quite to the contrary.
Well, the theme of older women I tapped into and interviewed, and I interviewed 34 of the 155 women that I surveyed. These women are highly educated, very competent, energetic, accomplished, healthy, which is certainly key, and very independent. And they are people who are holding on to the jobs they have had for a long time. Some of them are doing part-time work, slowing down a little bit, and some of them have moved into a second or third career, but a lot of them are holding on to jobs they had. Having said that, in the general population, it is true that older people, once they are out of work, have a much harder time getting another job. So,
sorry, I didn't quite follow that.
Yeah.
Older people, once they're out of work, have a hard time finding a job. So you're saying that the women that you were speaking
getting back in.
But the women that you were talking to were women who simply worked straight through. They never quit?
That's what I'm saying.
I see.
Yeah, the people I was surveying and interviewing pretty much were doing what their career job had been, and they are not the people we're talking about who are finding it very hard to get hired. Once out of work, older people find it especially hard to get hired. During the recession, however, they were not the people who were getting laid off. It was younger people who were getting laid off.
Mm-hmm. That's actually one of the reasons. I hear a lot of people say that's one of the reasons for the high unemployment now is because there's not the norm where the older people retire and leave the workforce, making room for the younger people, but rather they're not leaving, and so there's no room for the younger people.
Well, a lot of the older people are, as I said, highly accomplished and doing jobs that you can't just come out of college and in a year become be the CEO or the brain surgeon or the head of the law firm or whatever. You do have to work your way up,
Sure.
even though a lot of young people don't necessarily believe that.
So if you were talking or advising someone who's, let's say, in his late 50s or in her 60s, would you say it's better to keep working or to retire?
Well, certainly it depends on one's individual circumstances. The really major reason the women told me that they're still working is that how much they enjoy their work. And I think unless you really love your job as they do, it could be hard to continue. And a lot of people say, I just love my colleagues, or and if you don't enjoy your work and you don't enjoy your colleagues and you have a horrible boss, it might make sense to retire. But then you come back to some of the practical realities of whether you need the income or not. Have you saved enough for retirement? Are you going to get the smallest amount of Social Security, or in this country, that's a big thing. Or are you going to, if you wait till later, if you delay your retirement, you'll get more. And then your health is, of course, a major factor. Do you have the stamina to do the job? And a lot of people talk to me about whether they had plans for what to do in retirement, because some of them were honest enough to say, I'm afraid of retirement. My brain's going to turn to mush. I'll be bored. I won't have any purpose. I won't have a reason to get up in the morning. And the people who want to be actively engaged, they want to feel like they're making a difference, making a contribution.
I think that's very important
for women.
That gives them. I think that's very important for everyone to feel they're used to feeling important for their whole career. We're talking with Liz Fideler, who's at the Sloan Center on Aging and Work at Boston College. She's been talking to us about people going into the workforce. So, of the people you spoke to, did most of them have to continue working, or was it just something that they wanted to do?
On the whole, the women I spoke with, the women I interviewed, and the women I surveyed are people who have a choice, and there really is that really is an important distinction. There are people who need to work to make ends meet. Maybe they're less educated and low income workers, and they have to work. But the women I was speaking with are relatively comfortable financially. A little over half of them did say that they needed the income. Some of them are supporting a grandchild who's going to college, paying the college tuition or helping to pay college tuition, or they're paying off a mortgage, or they're supporting their own elderly parents or another relative. So there were reasons for income-related reasons, and health insurance is a very big concern for people, whether they're low income or not, and a lot of people are trying to maintain their coverage.
Okay, so
let's investments. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to focus on the investment thing. You know that my day job is that I'm a financial planner. I work with people. Mostly I deal with retirement planning, and of course I always tell people that retiring is the worst financial planning decision they can make, because it means that they are no longer earning money, but they are still eating, and that means that they have a negative cash flow situation. Do you think it's responsible for me as a financial planner to advise people to work beyond the normal retirement age?
I certainly do. I think it's entirely reasonable for you to, provided that the person you're advising has good health, and essentially that becomes the bottom line. And then the other kinds of circumstances to take into consideration are, beside the financial, are familial, personal issues, and again, whether they enjoy what they do and so on. So I think it's very reasonable to encourage them to continue working as long as it's rewarding, and that's not just financially rewarding, that's also, you might say, these are their intrinsic rewards to working, whether they feel a sense of purpose and whether they feel engaged and making a contribution.
I mean, you mentioned a moment ago that half the people you surveyed actually wanted to work because they needed the income. That's a lot of people, half.
Yes. Well, they mentioned it. It was not their only motivation for working. And the general point is that the wolf would not be at the door if they stopped working. And these are people who probably could manage. Maybe you'd say they like the income more than that they desperately need the income. They could manage, as compared to people who are working in low-wage and high-turnover jobs, the Walmart supermarket kind of jobs.
Okay, so let me focus on my question that comes up to me, really in real life, is that when we're talking about putting together a financial plan, and we calculate how much cash someone's going to need for the rest of their life, then we'll say, a lot of times clients will say to me, well, Doug, I like my job and I'd like to keep working till I'm 70 or 75 or 80. And then I tell them that what I've seen, or just from either both anecdotally but as well in some of more academic studies, is that when people, even though people believe that they will work longer, they just find that at a certain age they're too tired and they don't have the strength. So statistically, is it reasonable for me to allow them to include in their financial plan that they're going to be working into retirement? Or should I say, let's plan that you don't, but if you do, then great, you'll have more money at the end?
Well, I suppose it's always good to hedge your bets and plan, for either eventuality. I think that there's another quality that I'd like to bring into this for the women, that there was a feminist spirit. Most of the women I interviewed came of age some in the late 50s, but mostly in the 60s, and some in the early 70s, when employment opportunities were limited. You could be a teacher, a nurse, a secretary, and maybe a social worker. There were some exceptions, of course, but a lot of these women went back to school and were able to make career moves into professions that had always interested them, and they got into business and government and arts and doing other things. And they may have taken time out to raise a family, but now they're at the peak of their career, so why should they stop? There's a sense of, I worked damn hard to get here, and I'm good at it, and I'm earning a really good salary, or have really good income, and a lot of them are self-employed and or consulting now. They're not all working for a company, and so they're not going to get laid off, and they have a choice. They can work as much as they want, and they're very feisty, and they're saying, I'm using my skills and my abilities. Why should I stop?
That's great. That sounds like a fabulous attitude, and I hope that lots of people enjoy their work and continue doing it for a very long time. Thinking of work, Liz, we are just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, could you just tell people, A, what you're working on now, and B, how they can follow your work?
Well, first, what I'm working on is, you might call it a sequel or a companion to the book Women Still at Work, and it's about men still at work.
Like me.
The book on men still at work is due out in February 2014 from the same publisher. It's Roman and Littlefield, and if they want to see the book Women Still at Work, I have a website, and I can give you that.
Sure.
https:// and it's Roman, ROWMAN.com/ISBN/978-144-221-5504.
Okay, to make it a little bit easier for everyone, what we'll do is we'll put a link to that on the Goldstein on Gelt website. Just go to goldsteinongelt.com, click on show notes, and then we'll put a link there directly to the book.
That's great. So the book that is out now is Women Still at Work, and the book that's forthcoming in February is Men Still at Work. And in the second book, in Men Still at Work, I make comparisons between the two genders on the questions that I asked both.
Okay, looking forward to that. Liz Fideler, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Doug. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.